and welcome to Jason's Cut. Try that again. Let's welcome back. Hello, and welcome back to Jason's Macintosh Museum. I'm Jason, your host, and today we're looking at part 2 of the video series on bad capacitors in Macintosh computers. So this video will talk about how to replace the electrolytic capacitors on a Macintosh surface mount logic board, including all the various components that you'll need and the procedure to follow. At least it's the procedure that I follow. I'm sure other people have their own ways of doing it. This is how I choose to do it. So what we'll do is we'll first of all go through all of the various parts that you'll need, and then I'll show you how it's done. Okay, so the various components you'll need in order to replace your capacitors, well, first of all, you need to obtain the replacement capacitors for the particular board that you've got. So the first step would be to identify what capacitors are currently on the board and work out their rating. Now, every capacitor has basically two numbers associated with it. You have a capacitance value, which is normally measured in microfarads, and you have a voltage rating normally measured in volts. And so, in fact, if I flip this board over, hopefully I'll be able to show you, hopefully if this camera will focus. I don't think it wants to focus today. Where's the capacitor? Here we are. Now these three at the corner of the board, it's still on its side, but if you look at them, you can see that they say 47, is that 47? Yeah, 47 16 volt. So what these are 47 microfarad 16 volt capacitors. And it seems to be a fairly common value that's used on a lot of Macintosh models. And let's get that out of the way. If you look at one of the other ones, I think there's another one with a slightly different value. It's another 4716. There's another one with a different value here somewhere. Here we go. This one's a little bit different. This one here is a, what does that say? That is a 100 microfarad. Is that 6 point? I can't even see that. 6.3 volt is what that is. Oh, I'll just put that back to where I had it. If the board's going to sit straight, there we go. So that one's a 100 microfarad, 6.3 volt. And then the smaller ones you can see down here, this group of 4, are I think 10 microfarad, 16 volt. Bit hard to see through the camera screen. Have a quick look at that. Yes, they're 10 microfarad, 16 volt. So basically you have to acquire the capacitors you need to match the ones that are currently on the board. And so I've done that, and I have the new capacitors down here. So you can see we have the group of 4, group of 5, and 1 by itself. So these are standard electrolytic radial, that's what I was looking for, radial capacitors rather than axial. Axial capacitors have a lead coming out of each end, whereas radial have both leads coming out of the same side. So you can see that they're standard electrolytic capacitors. I think the total cost for all those was about $2, I think, if I remember correctly, so certainly not expensive to buy. So basically what you want are standard electrolytic capacitors. You don't want bipolar capacitors. You don't want ultra-low ESD capacitors. I found that there's no need to have those. So these are your standard electrolytic capacitors. So you need those. Then what you need is something to remove the capacitors from the board. Now, I must admit, I take a fairly brutal approach to that. I use basically nothing more than a pair of pliers to gently pull them off the board. And once they're off the board, I then use some isopropyl alcohol to clean the board and crucially clean off any trace of the old electrolyte which may have leaked out already. That's very important to do. And I use some cotton wool sticks or Q-tips, I think they're called in the US, to wipe the excess off the board. And then of course you have to solder the new capacitors on. So I have, of course, a soldering iron and some solder as well. You don't need very much solder, but of course you will need some to solder the new capacitors onto the board. And you'll probably also need, you'll need probably a pair of tin snips or scissors to trim the leads on the new capacitors down to size. So that's really all there is to it. So what I'll do is I'll get the camera set up on the board, and hopefully I can zoom in far enough that you'll be able to see what I'm doing, and we'll go through the procedure of changing the capacitors. Okay, well hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So the first step is, at least with these capacitors, is to trim the actual leads on the capacitors so that they're about the right length. And so what I normally do in this case is I normally leave probably about 1.5 centimeters of lead for each capacitor. So in this case I'm simply going to cut them off just above the top of this cardboard carrier. So just get the scissors and we'll see if we can cut them just about like that. There we go. There we go. So now we have the capacitors. There we are. So they're now trimmed. So I'll do the same for these ones. Oops. Of course, make sure they don't fall off the table. Oh. Come on, that's it. Okay. I think one fell down. There we go. And this last one here. So let's trim that off. Okay, so now what I have to do now is look at the capacitors on the logic board and work out. Well, actually, no. We'll take the old ones off the board first. So we just put these aside and get the board. Okay. So what we'll do is we will start by taking off these three capacitors down here. Hopefully you'll be able to see them clearly. See if I can zoom in a bit more. This camera loses focus if I zoom in too far. Yes, I think I've zoomed in a bit too far. Try and zoom out a bit. Okay, I think that's about as good as I can get. So, if you look at the capacitors on the board, they are, focus. Come on, focus. You can see that there's a small surface mount blob of solder on each side, and that's something else you need to be careful of, because most electrolytic capacitors are polarized. In other words, they have a positive and a negative side, and it's very important you don't hook them up, or you solder the new ones in. It's important you don't solder them in back to front, otherwise things can go pop, literally. So you can see that, for example, here these capacitors have a black stripe just there, and that indicates the negative side of the capacitor. Let's see if I can improve the focus on this. This focus is pretty bad. I don't know if I can zoom out slightly. It's a little bit better. So you can see they have a black stripe on the side. That's the negative side of the capacitor. And if you look closely on the board, if you can see it there, just where I'm pointing, you can see a little plus icon that's printed onto the logic board itself, which indicates the positive side. So with these capacitors, thankfully, even if you take these off without noticing where the black stripe was, you've still got the little positive icon here on the board to identify which side's positive and which side is negative. Now comes the time where we remove the capacitors. Now there are several methods of doing this. I know some people who will try and melt the solder on each side of the capacitor, here and here, and will try and pull them off like that. I found that generally doesn't work too well. I basically get a pair of pliers and very gently rock the capacitor back and forth, rock it in this direction back and forth, and one of two things will normally happen. Either the solder the joint will break cleanly off, which is what you want, leaving the solder pads on the board, or the capacitor will pull off and it will leave the metal prongs that go up inside the capacitor, and they will stay attached to the board. It really depends on the age of the capacitor, really. So I'm going to try to rock these off very carefully, and we'll see how we go. So let's try this. So if I get it there, if I just rock it very carefully back and forth. Okay, now what happened here is the capacitor itself came out, as you can see, but it left the little pins, as you can see the pins there. It left the pins attached to the board. So to remove those, you have to very carefully grab hold of the pin, and I rotate it this way so it peels back from the logic board, and hopefully if you're careful you won't break any traces. Let's see. I'm just going to be very careful with this. There we go. So that one has now come off, and notice that the bottom of the capacitor, the mounting plate for it, breaks apart, but that's okay. You just move that to the side. We won't need that. So let me just pull the remainder of that off. Actually, let's get this other pin out first. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So if I now carefully rotate this one back, there we go, good. This one came off cleanly. So you can see what we're left with are the two solder pads, focus, the two solder pads that are used to connect the capacitor to the board. And that's ideal, that's what we want, because it makes the job of soldering the new capacitor on very easy. But notice, underneath, you could see a bit of residue underneath where the capacitor sat, and that is the beginnings of electrolyte leakage. So it's very important before we solder the new capacitor on that we clean this up. So what I'll do is I'll now take these other two off in the same way, and we'll see if they come off cleanly as well. So again, we'll just take a hold of the... I might change the camera angle, bear with me. Okay, well hopefully you've got a better view of what I'm doing now. So if I carefully grab this and again just carefully wiggle it back and forth, you don't want to apply too much pressure, otherwise you'll probably tear the traces off the board. Okay, well again this capacitor came out and it left the pins behind. If the camera's going to focus on that, probably not, but again we'll just put that aside, and we have the two pins. So again, very carefully rotate out. I'm not getting a good grip on that. Let me try that again. Get a good grip on the tab and very carefully rotate, and it's come off cleanly. That's good. And of course it breaks the plastic mounting base for the capacitor, but that's okay, we don't need that. And we do the same with this one. Now this one, of course, we rotate in this direction so that we peel it back. So just be very gentle. Oop, let's try that again. Let's see if I can get, hopefully you can see what I'm doing. There we go, very good. So again, that one came off cleanly too. And again, all we're left with is the focus. All we're left with are the pads on the board. And again, we have some evidence of some electrolyte leakage, but it's not too bad. Again, these capacitors are just starting to fail. Okay, well, let's try this one. Same procedure, just very carefully rock it back and forth. And once again, this one looks like it's coming out and leaving the pins behind, but that's okay. We'll just very carefully peel these pins back. Just apply very steady pressure. There we go, that pin came out. And same with this one. Peel it in that direction, very careful. And there we go. So we've now successfully removed all three capacitors in this section of the board, and we have the traces and the pads intact. So the next step, whoops, you can't see where I am. That's better. The next step is to clean this area very thoroughly. So to do that, I use isopropyl alcohol, and certainly the purer the better. I think this is, I think it's actually 100%. It doesn't actually say that it's diluted at all. So this is the stuff to use, because you don't want to leave any residue when you clean the board. And get yourself a cotton wool bud or Q-tip or whatever you like to call them, and we'll just spray some of this on the general area of these capacitors, and then we'll wipe away any excess with the Q-tip. So just carefully rub it around the area where the capacitor sat, and make sure you get into all the, as you can see what's already come off on the focus. If it's come off on the Q-tip, you can see that there's quite a lot of brown residue, which is the electrolyte that has already leaked out of these capacitors. So I'll get another one, and we'll do another clean. Thankfully, these haven't leaked enough to the point where they've corroded the circuit traces, which is good, because I've seen some that have totally eaten away at the surrounding traces, which of course is not a good thing for a logic board. So we'll just, okay, that looks good. So at this point, the traces are, well, the area around the capacitors is nice and clean, the board is nice and clean. If it'll focus, come on, focus. So at this point we can start soldering the replacement capacitors onto the board. I suggest we'll just give the alcohol a few minutes to evaporate away, and then we can put our new capacitors on. So these three capacitors were the 47 microfarad 16 volt. So let me get one of those here. So you can see that's a 16 volt 47 focus. Come on, focus. There we go. I think you can read what that says. So if you look at the leads of the capacitor, they're currently too narrow to fit. My hand's in the way. Too narrow to fit on the board. So in other words, we have to spread these leads out slightly so that the spacing matches the pads on the board. So I just get my pair of pliers and I just very carefully twist them out like that, and out a bit like that. But you have to, when you twist them, try and keep the leads parallel at the end. In other words, like this. If the camera will focus, like that. So now, as you can see, when we hold the capacitor next to the pads, the spacing is about right. So the idea is the capacitor will more or less sit upright in this position, but the solder will hold it in place. There's really no danger of the capacitor falling off or anything like that. So what we'll do now is, let's get the soldering iron out. And what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of extra solder that I have here, put a little bit of extra solder on these pads, just a little bit more, just to give it the best chance of adhering to the leads of the capacitor. And of course, remember again, note the orientation of the capacitor because these are polarized. On most electrolytics, the negative side is marked. As you can see on this one, focus. It doesn't want to focus. The negative side is marked with a stripe, a white stripe. That indicates the negative lead. And on the board here, you can see that the positive side is marked here. So we have to put the negative, obviously, over here. So let's get some solder on here. My soldering skills are not the greatest, but hopefully I can do this without stuffing it up too much. So I do recommend a gas-powered soldering iron for these situations because you're not tethered to a power point. So I'll just fire that up. There we go. Let that warm up for a second. Just wait for that to warm up. So I'll put a little bit on the pads. Oop. Get myself in shot there. There we go. So actually, we'll start with this one down here. We'll start with that one. So hopefully it's melted so I can put a bit on the pads, just a little bit. Yeah, it's still warming up. Just turn the heat up a bit. There we go, a bit on that and a bit on that. There we go. So we basically, in a sense, we've tinned the pads on the board. So I orient the capacitor. Now positive is down this end, so I have to put the capacitor, I have to put it, let's see, I have to put it like that. So I'm going to basically stand it up, and I'm going to then, when the leads are in place, just melt the solder on each side and gently push down so that the leads then contact the board, and hold it in place for a second, and that's it. Now, I may have to move the capacitor because it's actually very close to the power supply connector, so all I have to do is just gently push out on the capacitor while I move it up, just heating each one just so that I'm not applying too much force. And a little bit more. There we go. And as a final check, I will just apply a little bit more solder with the lead in place. Wait for one side to cool off, of course, before you do the other side. It's important as well not to apply too much heat to the leads because you'll end up heating up the capacitor, which is not good for them. There we go. Okay, so at that point, we've replaced that capacitor. So you can see that it's now in position, it's now sitting vertically, and hopefully there'll be enough clearance in the case when there should be when I put the lid on, but we'll find out. But as you can see, it is now sitting on the board, if it's going to focus. So it's sitting nicely on the board in position. And I'll double check we've got our polarity correct, which we do. And so I'm now going to go ahead and change out the rest of them. So what we'll do is we'll do the other two on camera, and then I'll shut the camera off and do the rest, and we will see if we were successful in getting the LC3 to boot like it should. So next up, we will tin the pads on this section, on this capacitor here. So we'll just do that now. Just a little bit's all we need. Just just to give it a good chance. There we go. Now I need to take the replacement capacitor, make sure it's the right one. No, that's not the right one. Let's try that one. No, that's not the right one. I should have grouped them. That one's the right one. So again, we have to take the leads and twist them out. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Oops, that was probably a bit much. That's probably a bit wide, but we'll see. I'll just squeeze them back in a bit. Let's see how they fit. It works well. Yep, good. So we'll flip it over because negative is on, positive is on this side, negative is on that side. So again, we'll try and do this vertically because this one will probably if we do it vertically. Okay, so now that we've got the soldering iron tip cleaned, let's put this capacitor on. And let's see, negative is that way. So you see what I'm doing, hopefully. Oh. There we go. There we go. Oh, I've got to make it a little bit, make it vertical. Oop. That's good. And now we finish it up. A bit more solder on that. And a bit more on that. It's obviously very important not to cross any tracks either when you're applying the solder, because that would be a bad thing too. So that one is now in place. Yes, looks good. Yep, that's in place. So now we'll do the next one. Just clean the soldering iron. There we go. Okay, next one. Just tin the pads. I've got to get the other capacitor ready. Getting ahead of myself. Nope. Which one is it? It's 47. That's the one. Once again, we'll get the leads and move them out slightly. There we are. So we keep them, we move them out, but they're still parallel. And let's, remember the polarity. Let's see if that fits. Make them a little bit wider. Let's try that. Okay. Good. Okay, we're ready to solder this one on. So let's go. Okay, now just get that, finish soldering that up. Just a little bit, not too much. There we go. Right, there we go. So now we have successfully replaced those 3 electrolytic capacitors. Again, it doesn't look as neat and as tidy as the original surface mount cans, but this type of capacitor hopefully will last quite a bit longer. Well, that's the theory anyway. So what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and change all the other capacitors, and when we're done, we'll have a look and see if we've fixed the LC3. Well, I thought it might happen, so I thought I'd bring you all along to see this, but on the very next capacitor I tried to remove, one of the traces pulled away with the pin, which can happen if you're not taking enough care. So as you can see, hopefully you'll be able to see it here, this capacitor that I just removed, you can see that this pad is intact, but this one is not. It actually pulled the pad off the board along with the pin. So what I've had to do is I've actually had to go back to where the pin, where the pad broke off, where the trace is still on the board. I've actually had to scrape down until I can see some of the copper, as you can see there, which I can hopefully use to solder the, was it the negative lead of the capacitor to. So be very, very careful when you do this and learn from my mistakes. That's all I can say. So hopefully I can recover from that. But we should still be okay, and we'll continue on. Okay, well, it's about 3/4 of an hour later, and I finally got all the capacitors replaced. Now, as I showed before, I did have an issue where one of them, one of the pads actually pulled off the board, but I was able to trace the pad back to where it was not pulled off, and then solder the lead of the capacitor to that. If I can get a shot of that. This camera does not want to focus close up. If you can see that capacitor there, if you can see what I've done there, I've actually soldered it to the part of the board that still has the copper trace exposed, and I had to do the same with one over here. I don't know how it's going to make, if it's going to make that clear, but one of them there, I had the same problem. So thankfully, if you do encounter that, if the pad lifts off the board, the entire trace, you can always follow the trace back and then scrape off the coating to reveal the copper underneath, and you can often solder the capacitor lead to that, which is what I've had to do. But it's funny, I've not normally had this problem. It must be just the one that I choose to do a video on. And of course, because I can't count, I forgot about one capacitor, which is the one just, oh, focus! God, this camera. Actually, you can't even see it because it's, if I take the sim out, you'll be able to see it. That one right there, I actually forgot about that. So when I bought the replacement capacitors, I forgot to buy a replacement for that. So I've changed all of them except one. So the question is, though, will this machine work and will it boot? So let's try. I haven't tried to start this up. I have no idea what it's going to do. So let me get the camera set up and let's see if I've killed the LC3 or if I've brought it back to life. Okay, so I've got a monitor hooked up to the LC3 just to see if it will boot. Again, I have no idea if it's going to work. I have not tried this. So let's turn everything on and hope for the best. Hope nothing goes pop. Monitor on. Give it a second to warm up. Okay, here we go. That's a good sign. Well, it chimed immediately, so that's a very good sign. Ah, very good. Very good. Good, I didn't actually kill it. That's good. Let me just see if I can fix the camera and stop that flickering. Can I do it while I'm recording? I'm not sure. Let's see. Oh, there we go. That's better. Very good. Very good. Oh, well, that's that's a relief. So the LC3 is now working and is now chiming as soon as I turn the power on. So that's good. But I will have to change that last capacitor there, and that'll be that. Okay, excellent, Excellent. Okay, well, so that concludes the video on changing capacitors in an old Macintosh logic board. So, even though I stuffed up a few things with the with removing the old capacitors, thankfully I was able to recover and get it working. So, hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next installment of problems you encounter with old Apple Macs. And the next installment we'll be talking about these things. The dreaded PRAM batteries. Because anybody who knows these old Macs knows that these batteries like to leak. And when they leak, they can do far more damage than a capacitor ever could. So that's what we'll be discussing on the next episode of Jason's Macintosh Museum. So once again, thank you for watching.